Thanksgiving morning arrived quietly in Colorado. The mountains were already covered in snow. The air was cold. The town of Woodland Park was calm. Nothing felt unusual. Inside a small home, a young mother was preparing for the day. Her name was Kelsey Berreth. She was 29 years old, a flight instructor, calm, responsible, focused. Flying had always been her passion. Friends described her as organized and careful, the kind of person who planned everything. Her life looked stable. She had a job she loved. She had a young daughter, and she had a fiancé. His name was Patrick Frazee. From the outside, their relationship looked normal. They had met years earlier through a dating website. Patrick was a rancher in rural Colorado, quiet, reserved, hard to read. Still, the relationship moved forward. They became engaged. Soon after, their daughter was born, a little girl named Kaylee. Friends believed Kelsey was building the life she wanted, a home, a family, a future. But relationships are rarely as simple as they appear. Some people close to Kelsey noticed distance between the couple. Patrick rarely visited. He lived on his ranch in Florissant. Kelsey lived in Woodland Park, just a short drive apart, yet they often seemed separated by something larger. Patrick preferred isolation. Kelsey preferred structure and routine. Still, nothing suggested danger. Not yet. On Thanksgiving morning in 2018, Kelsey made a few short trips around town. Security cameras later confirmed it.
She visited a grocery store. She stopped at a coffee shop. Employees remembered her holding her daughter. Everything looked normal, just a mother running errands. Later that morning, Kelsey returned home. At some point that day, Patrick Frazee arrived. Investigators would later determine he came to the house carrying a baseball bat. But on that morning, nobody knew that. Neighbors did not hear anything unusual. No screaming, no signs of struggle, no calls for help. Only silence. And silence can hide many things. That same day, Patrick left the house with the child. Kaylee was safe, but Kelsey was gone. At first, nothing seemed strange. People disappear for short periods all the time. Phones die, plans change, life gets busy. But small details began to feel wrong. Kelsey did not contact her mother. That alone was unusual. Her mother, Kelsey Berreth, spoke with her daughter often, sometimes every day. Then something even stranger happened. Text messages suddenly appeared on Kelsey's phone. Messages sent to friends, messages sent to family. They claimed she was leaving town, starting a new life. But the tone felt different. Cold, short, mechanical. Not like Kelsey. Her coworkers also noticed something odd. She missed work. For a flight instructor, that almost never happened. No call, no explanation. Her employer became concerned.
Days passed. Then more days. Still no confirmed sightings. And that was when the questions began. Where was Kelsey Berreth? Why would a devoted mother disappear without warning? Why would she abandon her job? And who was sending those strange messages? At first, Patrick Frazee appeared calm. He told people Kelsey was fine. He suggested she might have gone somewhere, maybe Idaho, maybe visiting family, maybe starting over. His explanations shifted, small changes in the story, tiny inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, but something about it felt wrong. Investigators would later say the same thing. Something about this disappearance didn't fit. Because people can disappear, but their patterns rarely disappear with them. And Kelsey Berreth was a woman of patterns, schedules, plans, routine. Then investigators discovered something disturbing. Kelsey had not used her phone. Her bank accounts were untouched. Her car never moved. Her home looked abandoned, almost as if she had simply vanished. But that wasn't the most disturbing part, because behind the quiet ranch life of Patrick Frazee, someone else was about to enter the story. And when she finally spoke to investigators, everything changed. For several days, the town waited. People believed Kelsey would return. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she went somewhere quietly. Maybe there was an explanation. But the silence kept growing. On November 25th, Kelsey's employer made a decision. They called the police. A missing person report was filed in Woodland Park. At first, the case looked simple. An adult woman missing. No obvious signs of violence. No confirmed witnesses. But investigators started with the basics. Phone records, bank activity, security cameras. Very quickly, a pattern appeared. Or, more accurately, the absence of one. Kelsey's life had stopped moving. Her phone stopped traveling. Her credit cards were never used. Her car stayed parked. Everything simply froze on Thanksgiving Day, November 22, 2018. That alone worried investigators, because people who leave voluntarily still move through the world. They buy food, they use gas stations, they withdraw money. But Kelsey Berreth did none of those things, not once. Then detectives began interviewing the people closest to her. Friends, co-workers, family members. Everyone told the same story. Kelsey loved routine. She loved her daughter. She would never disappear without telling someone, especially her mother, especially not on Thanksgiving. Investigators also wanted to speak with the fiancé.
Is there anything else that you remember?
I moved the couch. I wiped the couch off. There was blood behind the couch down the wall.
Patrick Frazee. Patrick did speak with police, but something about the conversation felt strange. He appeared calm, almost too calm. He told detectives that Kelsey had asked him to pick up their daughter that day. He claimed she wanted some time alone. Then he said something else, something unexpected. He told police that Kelsey might have left for Idaho. According to him, she wanted to start a new life, a fresh start, without him, without anyone. It sounded possible, but the story had problems. Detectives asked simple questions. When did she say that? What exactly did she say? Did she pack anything? Patrick's answers were vague, sometimes unclear, and sometimes different. Then investigators learned another detail. Patrick had never reported Kelsey missing, not once, even though he had their daughter, even though days had passed, even though no one could reach her. That detail stayed with investigators, because most people would call the police, especially if the mother of their child vanished. But Patrick Frazee did not. Instead, he continued working on his ranch in Florissant, feeding animals, fixing equipment, living normally, almost as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the search for Kelsey intensified. Police searched her home. The house looked mostly normal, but something small stood out. Cleaning supplies, lots of them. The smell of chemicals lingered in certain areas. It was subtle, but noticeable. Then detectives found something else. Kelsey's phone had sent text messages after Thanksgiving, messages claiming she was safe, messages telling people not to worry. But investigators studied the messages carefully. The wording felt wrong. The tone felt cold. Short responses, unusual phrases. Friends said the same thing. It didn't sound like her. Investigators also tracked the phone itself. The signal moved, but not very far. It traveled between Woodland Park and Florissant, two places connected to one person, Patrick Frazee. Then detectives discovered something even more concerning. Some of the messages were sent days after Kelsey disappeared, but the phone activity matched Patrick's movements almost exactly. it raised a disturbing possibility. Someone else might have been using her phone. But investigators still lacked proof. No body, no witnesses, no confession. Just a growing list of inconsistencies. And then another strange detail appeared. Patrick mentioned someone during the investigation, a woman from another state.
Her name was Krystal Kenney. Patrick described her casually, just a friend, someone he knew from Idaho. At the time, it didn't seem important, but detectives noted the name. Because investigations often turn on small details, and this was one of them. Meanwhile, Kelsey's family refused to believe she left voluntarily. Her mother, Kelsey Berreth, flew to Colorado. She wanted answers. She began speaking publicly, pleading for information, hoping someone had seen something. The case started gaining media attention. News stations covered the disappearance. Posters appeared across Colorado. The question spread quickly. Where was Kelsey Berreth? Police continued gathering evidence quietly. Phone data, travel records, digital timelines. Slowly, a picture began forming. And it pointed back to the same person again and again. Patrick Frazee. But investigators still needed something stronger. Something that could break the case open. Because suspicion alone is not enough. Then, detectives made a decision. They contacted the woman from Idaho, Krystal Kenney. At first, it seemed like a routine interview. Just another person connected to Patrick. But what she eventually told investigators would change the entire investigation. Detectives expected a routine interview. Just another person connected to Patrick Frazee, someone who might know small details, nothing more. The woman's name was Krystal Kenney. She lived in Idaho, several hours away from Woodland Park. At first, the conversation felt normal. Krystal spoke carefully. She answered questions slowly. Sometimes she paused before speaking. Investigators noticed something. She seemed nervous, not defensive, just uneasy. Detectives began with simple questions. How did she know Patrick? How long had they been in contact? Krystal admitted something important. She was not just a friend. She was his girlfriend. At the same time, Patrick was engaged to Kelsey Berreth. That detail immediately changed the tone of the interview. Now, detectives had a motive, a hidden relationship. But that was only the beginning. Then Krystal said something that stunned investigators. Patrick had talked about killing Kelsey, not once, 3 different times. The first conversation happened months before Thanksgiving. Patrick asked Krystal a strange question. Would she help him kill Kelsey? Krystal believed he was choking. She laughed it off. She told him no. But the conversation returned again and again. Each time, Patrick sounded more serious. He described possible plans.
Ways to make it look like an accident. Ways to make it look like self-defense. Krystal claimed she always refused. But she never reported those conversations. Detectives asked why. Krystal struggled to explain. Fear, confusion, loyalty. Maybe all 3. Then investigators asked the most important question. What happened on Thanksgiving? Krystal took a long breath. And then she told them. Patrick called her that evening. His voice sounded calm. Too calm. He told her something shocking. Kelsey is gone. At first, Krystal thought he meant she had left, but Patrick clarified. He said he had killed her. Inside her own home in Woodland Park, investigators listened carefully. Krystal described what Patrick told her. He said he brought a baseball bat to the house. He waited for Kelsey inside. When she walked into the room, he attacked. Krystal said Patrick claimed Kelsey fought back. She tried to defend herself, but the attack continued. Eventually, she stopped moving. Patrick told Krystal the scene was messy. There was blood. A lot of it. So he began cleaning for hours using cleaning supplies. Bleach, trash bags, anything he could find. Then he made another decision. He needed help. Not with the murder, but with what came after. Patrick asked Krystal to come to Colorado. He told her to clean the house again, to remove any remaining evidence. Krystal agreed. That decision would change everything. A few days later, she drove from Idaho to Colorado. She arrived at Patrick's ranch in Florissant. Patrick gave her instructions: clean Kelsey's home, wipe everything, burn anything suspicious. Krystal said she followed those instructions. She entered the house. The smell hit her immediately. Strong chemicals, bleach everywhere. The floors had been scrubbed, but some stains remained. Krystal said she cleaned for hours, wiping walls, scrubbing floors, removing trash bags. Then Patrick told her to burn the evidence: clothes, cleaning supplies, trash. They burned everything in a metal container on the ranch, smoke rising into the cold Colorado air. Investigators listening to Krystal's story understood something important. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a murder investigation. But one question remained: where was Kelsey's body? Detectives asked Krystal that directly. Her answer was chilling. Patrick never told her. She never saw the body. Trash bags, anything he could find. Then he made another decision. He needed help. Not with the murder, but with what came after. Patrick asked Krystal to come to Colorado. He told her to clean the house again, to remove any remaining evidence. Krystal agreed. That decision would change everything. A few days later, she drove from Idaho to Colorado. She arrived at Patrick's ranch in Florissant. Patrick gave her instructions: clean Kelsey's home, wipe everything, burn anything suspicious. Krystal said she followed those instructions. She entered the house. The smell hit her immediately. Strong chemicals, bleach everywhere. The floors had been scrubbed, but some stains remained. Krystal said she cleaned for hours, wiping walls, scrubbing floors, removing trash bags. Then Patrick told her to burn the evidence: clothes, cleaning supplies, trash. They burned everything in a metal container on the ranch, smoke rising into the cold Colorado air. Investigators listening to Krystal's story understood something important. This was no longer a missing person case. This was a murder investigation. But one question remained: where was Kelsey's body? Detectives asked Krystal that directly. Her answer was chilling. Patrick never told her. She never saw the body.
By late December, investigators believed they understood what happened. Not every detail, not every movement, but the outline was becoming clear. The story of Kelsey Berreth was no longer a mystery of disappearance. It was a planned killing. And the person at the center of that story was still living freely. Patrick Frazee continued working on his ranch in Florissant, feeding cattle, repairing fences, caring for his daughter. But investigators were quietly rebuilding the timeline, piece by piece, hour by hour. They began with Thanksgiving morning, November 22, 2018. Security cameras confirmed that Kelsey returned to her home in Woodland Park that morning.
She carried groceries. She carried her daughter. She walked through the front door. That was the last confirmed moment she was seen alive. Sometime later that morning, Patrick Frazee arrived. According to the testimony of Krystal Kenney, he came prepared. He brought a baseball bat. Investigators believe he entered the home quietly, possibly while Kelsey was in another room. He waited. Minutes passed. Then Kelsey walked into the room. What happened next lasted only moments. Patrick attacked. The first blow came quickly, unexpected. Investigators believe Kelsey fought back. There were signs of movement inside the house, objects slightly displaced, small traces that survived the cleaning. But the attack continued, again and again. Eventually, the house fell silent. Afterward, Patrick faced a problem.
The scene was chaotic. Blood, damage, evidence everywhere. So he started cleaning. For hours, bleach, cleaning sprays, paper towels, trash bags. Investigators later discovered that many surfaces had been scrubbed repeatedly, almost obsessively. But complete erasure is nearly impossible. Tiny traces remained, hidden inside cracks, inside floor seams, inside microscopic fibers. Those details would later matter in court. After the cleaning, Patrick needed to remove the body. But investigators still do not know exactly how he did it. No confirmed location has ever been found. What detectives believe is this: Patrick transported the body somewhere in rural Colorado, an area with miles of open land, remote roads, deep terrain, places where something could disappear, maybe forever. Later that same day, Patrick drove back to Florissant with his daughter. From the outside, his life continued normally, but the digital evidence told another story. Phone data, vehicle movements, text messages. Investigators discovered that Patrick had Kelsey's phone, using it, sending messages, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive.
Messages were sent to coworkers, to family members, even to Kelsey's employer. Each message served the same purpose: delay, confusion, time. Time to clean, time to hide evidence, time to control the story. But the digital timeline betrayed him. Every signal from the phone matched Patrick's movements, not Kelsey's. Then investigators discovered something else. Patrick attempted to sell Kelsey's phone. He asked someone to reset it, to erase everything. Fortunately, that never fully happened. Much of the data survived. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing the final step: an arrest. But arrests require precision. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence carefully. Krystal's testimony, digital records, forensic traces, witness statements. Together, the picture was strong enough. On December 21, 2018, law enforcement moved in. Officers arrived at Patrick's ranch in Florissant. The moment was quiet. No dramatic chase, no resistance. Patrick Frazee was arrested without incident. He was charged with murder. As officers placed him into custody, the story he told the world finally collapsed. But even then, Patrick maintained his innocence. He said Kelsey had attacked him. He claimed self-defense.
A version of events that investigators had already examined and rejected. The case would now move to court, where the entire story would be told publicly for the first time. The planning, the attack, the cleanup, the lies.
and the testimony of the one person who knew the plan before it happened: Krystal Lee Kenney. For the Berreth family, the arrest brought a small measure of relief. But one painful truth remained. Kelsey's body had never been found. And without that final answer, some questions would never disappear. The trial began in the fall of 2019. The courtroom was quiet, but the case had already drawn national attention. A young mother was gone. Her body had never been found, and the man accused of killing her was sitting just a few feet away. Patrick Frazee sat at the defense table, calm, still, almost expressionless. Across the room sat the family of Kelsey Berreth. They had waited nearly a year for this moment, a year of questions, a year of silence. Now the story would finally be told in full. Prosecutors began carefully. They did not start with emotion. They started with the timeline. November 22, 2018, Thanksgiving morning. Security footage, phone data, witnesses. Step by step, the jury began to see the pattern. Kelsey's final movements, Patrick's arrival, the sudden stop in her digital activity. Then the text messages that followed, messages that investigators now believed Patrick had written. The prosecution argued that those messages were not communication. They were misdirection, an attempt to delay discovery, an attempt to buy time. Then the courtroom heard from one of the most important witnesses in the case, Krystal Lee Kenney. She walked to the stand slowly. The room was silent. For hours, she described the conversations she had with Patrick, the plans.
The 3 times he asked her to help kill Kelsey. Each story added another layer, another piece of the puzzle. She told the jury about the phone call on Thanksgiving night, the moment Patrick told her the murder had already happened. She described the cleaning, the bleach, the trash bags, the burning of evidence on the ranch in Florissant. The defense attacked her credibility immediately. They argued that Krystal was lying to save herself. They reminded the jury that she had accepted a plea deal, evidence tampering, 3 years in prison, in exchange for her testimony. But prosecutors had more than her words. They had digital evidence, phone records, location data, messages sent from Kelsey's phone. Each one aligned with Patrick's movements, not Kelsey's. Investigators also presented forensic evidence from the home in Woodland Park. Despite heavy cleaning, traces of blood had survived, hidden in areas most people never think about, inside floor seams, behind appliances, microscopic fragments that could not be erased. The prosecution argued that those traces told a clear story. A violent attack had occurred in that house, and it had been carefully cleaned afterward. Then the defense presented their case. Patrick Frazee did not testify. Instead, his attorneys offered a different version of events. They suggested Kelsey had attacked Patrick. They claimed he acted in self-defense. And they argued that Krystal Lee Kenney was the real killer. According to their theory, she was the one responsible, and Patrick was being blamed for her actions.
It was a dramatic claim, but the evidence did not support it. Phone data contradicted the story. Witness timelines contradicted the story. Even Krystal's travel records contradicted it. Slowly, the defense narrative began to collapse. By the time closing arguments arrived, the courtroom felt heavy. Prosecutors spoke about deception, about planning, about a man who wanted 2 lives, a fiancé in Colorado and a girlfriend in Idaho. And when those lives collided, he chose violence. The defense asked the jury to consider doubt.
to consider the missing body, because without a body, certainty becomes harder. The jury listened. They studied the evidence. Then they left the courtroom to deliberate. Hours passed, then more hours. Finally, the jury returned. The room fell silent. Patrick Frazee stood as the verdict was read. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of tampering with evidence. Guilty of solicitation to commit murder. The courtroom remained quiet, but the meaning of those words was final. In 2019, the judge delivered the sentence: life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Patrick Frazee would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For the Berreth family, the verdict brought justice, but not closure, because one truth remained unresolved. The body of Kelsey Berreth has never been found. Somewhere in the vast landscape of Colorado, the final piece of this story is still missing. Investigators believe Patrick Frazee knows exactly where she is, but he has never revealed the location. Not during the investigation, not during the trial.
Not even after the conviction. And that silence may last forever. But the story of Kelsey Berreth did not end with her disappearance. It ended with the truth. A truth uncovered piece by piece, through patience, through evidence, and through the determination of people who refused to let her simply vanish. Because sometimes justice arrives without every answer, but it still arrives. And in this case, it arrived for Kelsey. Why do you think he involved Krystal in this? Thank you to everyone who watched the video all the way to the end. Our team put a lot of effort into creating it. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. It's a huge motivation for us to work even harder and release new videos faster.